Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I'm here. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my co-host and colleague, Jim Gurley. And Jim and I had a pretty extensive pregame conversation, which inevitably involves something political because we can't help that in this day and age. But within that context, we came up with a topic we've talked about before, but a little bit of a nuance. So the overall topic, the categorical topic, I think is communication. And then one of the things that we discussed, Jim brought an image that we're going to reference, how to communicate. So the art of persuasion is kind of a subtopic. And then in the context of communication, how important it is to have a framework. And our podcast, the Imperfect Men's Club, is built on a framework. The 5 key areas of life in a circle centered by the ego or the self. And then it expands out into these 5 areas, and each of those 5 areas expands again. And the whole thing just keeps expanding geometrically, depending on how much detail you want to get into. But Jim, really interesting pregame conversation. The art of persuasion within the context of communication, and then the value of being able to do that in the context of a framework. I'll toss it over to you.
Yeah, Mark, I again appreciate the topics, especially the pregame, those conversations. I think that what we hope to accomplish today is the importance of having a framework and how much more effective we can be. And again, you're using our podcast as an example. The center of it always starts off with our self, and there's many selves, but the first one is self-awareness. And so just preparing for today, this morning, I was thinking of some topics, and I used a framework that I use internally. I have for some time. I call it the 5 W's, right? What is it? Who is it? When is it going to happen? Where it really gets specific and makes you answer questions in advance. So when you're speaking to somebody, and I use this framework on a new project that I'm putting together, and I was surprised how effective it was, because I had thought through these, but it also made it very fluid for the other person, because they right away understand the frame that they're working with. And the one thing I also like in the beginning of a project, I'll include an H, which is how, like, how are we going to accomplish this? But one of the words in the who is, because who are we? Instead of how to do something, it's always the right people, the who. And then what's in it? What's in it for us? Like, the kind of back to or what we talked about yesterday, or excuse me, last week, was the self-interest. Put that out right in the front, and then start with the assumptions to remove any what are your words, right? To improve the clarity, because effective people have the ability to communicate and with clarity, and it saves everybody a lot of time. And if there's a fit, there's a fit. If not, let's just move on. No hard feelings. So when we started talking about, you'll go through them, but I appreciate your framework that you use. I'll let you go into more specifics about when you're doing consulting and training. You talk about the what, the how, the to, and the when. So break that down for us, and then we'll go back and forth on some of these items that in this document I'd like you to share with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. The art of communication is always fascinated me. I grew up in a household where communication was valued, words were valued. We looked stuff up. We didn't watch a lot of TV. We read a lot of stuff, and I'm grateful for that kind of worldview from my childhood. And then again, I go into this career of helping people find work and negotiating and communicating in an interview, for instance, or any kind of negotiation. The way that you communicate it can make the difference between getting a job and not getting a job. I mean, communication is really powerful. And you referred to my framework. I don't even remember where I got that, whether I took that from someone else or I developed it over time, but it became pretty apparent to me. And I see it every day when I communicate with other people is the 4 components as I see it of my framework are like, what do you say? Right. And then how do you say it? And then to whom do you say it? And then arguably one of the most important pieces is when do you say it? You know,
Yeah.
and just as an example, Jim, I said this to you
Hey,
earlier.
Mark, let me just comment on this because I just want to reinforce
Mhm.
something you said because it's super important. Like you said, where the framework comes from doesn't matter. I think what you're saying is what I'm also saying is make that framework yours. So I use the 5 Ws, but then I drill down into it specifically of my interpretation of that, and that's what makes it effective, right? So it's not that you're trying to take somebody else's and then make it yours. You may use a number of different frameworks, but you have a framework that one you can communicate or articulate to somebody of the main objective, the goal of it, and then make it yours. So that's why when we started this call, I appreciate you saying, "Hey, I use this framework," and then you explained it to me. So now, so again, not to interrupt you, but I think it's important that you don't have to take somebody else's framework. You may use somebody else's framework to develop your own.
Yeah, yeah. I think you know, just as an example, the image that you shared is a series of boxes with little examples in each one, and there's 3 across, and I don't know, 5 or 6 down, so there's maybe 20 of them.
Mhm.
But just to give this some life, the first box is when you don't understand something. An incorrect example of responding to that would be I don't get it, right?
Mhm.
And a correct response that this individual says is, can you explain that again, please? And
Yeah.
to me, that's just, I mean, the difference between I don't get it and could you explain that again, please, is it's everything we're talking about. You know, how do
Mhm.
you say something? When do you say it? To whom do you say it? And how do you say it? I
Mhm.
think that I try when I'm teaching people about communication to get people to begin from a positive standpoint. Like as a for instance, Jim, the word problem, right? I always ask people to replace that with challenge, right?
Mm. So
Or
language, you go straight to language, right?
well,
Again,
I mean,
right now
yeah,
I'm trying to appreciate you have 4 items in your framework, right? The
yeah,
what, the
yeah.
how, the to, and the when. But
Yeah, I mean, what is a big time deal? Like the other one would be the other place you could replace challenge would be issue. You know, I got an
Mhm.
issue, I got a problem. Well, no, that's a challenge, or even better, man, that's an opportunity for improvement, right?
Interesting. Just by changing the word,
Yeah.
it changes. Well, it changes the tone. It changes the receiver. Uh, Everything on the other end changes because now they're more open to it. You're leading with something maybe a positive versus a negative. You lead with a
Yeah.
negative, which a lot of us do, then you obviously are going to trigger negative thoughts. So you're being somewhat proactive to be selective of the words you use. That's why I like, yeah, I said use one. I think we've got 9 or something.
Yeah, no, I
Well,
think that if you say to me, I've got a problem, my human nature is going to be like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want
yeah.
a problem. I got enough fucking problems, right?
Exactly.
But if you've identified an opportunity
Yeah.
for improvement, oh man, let's talk about that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's the same conversation, but it
It
comes
is.
from a completely different place.
You just change the tone. Yeah, yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
So what do you want?
So
You want to go through your framework of your, or do you want to just start checking off these
yeah, I
because there's
think
some
we
really
go
good ones here. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the next one is, you know, when you don't know something, the cheap, lazy, ineffective response is, I don't know. And the
Yeah.
other one, and everybody that's ever sold anything has probably been taught this in a sales class of some kind. I'll look
Mhm.
into that and I'll get back to you. Let me look that up and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That really means as well, that clearly means you don't know, but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're going to take it upon yourself to go find out.
Yeah.
Completely different place of
Yeah.
origin, you know?
Well, you've also become a completely different person from the other end, whether you realize it or not. That your everything they think about you is changing when you have a vocabulary like this versus the other one.
Well,
Again, a lot of
you're
these things we're doing, just not doing. We're just not. It's back to self awareness, right? It always comes back to self awareness. We're
yeah,
just not self aware of these words that we're using because they become habit. So yeah.
totally. I think what we're going to find, because I'm already sensing it in just the first two,
Hmm.
everybody knows these things.
Hmm.
No one's going to be surprised by any of these things, but they're going to hopefully go, man, I forgot about that, or
Yeah.
I'm not as sensitive to that as I once was, or maybe it's time to recalibrate my optimism and my ability to influence people without being manipulative, you know?
I'll let you know what I thought when I saw this, Mark, when I first read it. First thing I thought was, wow, that's really interesting, to see it. And then I started to think, wow, was I the asshole on the other end that was talking like that? Right? Think about that, right? You could
Yeah, we
really, it wasn't just about what I'm certainly what I want to do going forward, but was I the guy that was using these words? And
of course you were, and I
of
was
course,
too. Of
of course we
course.
were. Yeah, it's
Of
back
course.
back to the
Yeah.
self-awareness, right? So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
the next one's interesting because, there's this whole notion of apologizing.
oh yeah.
There's in the media now, in society now, people are apologizing for things that they probably, in my estimation, shouldn't be apologizing for, and causing more damage. But this example is when you're a little bit late, which we've all been, right? Sorry for the delay is the default negative response.
Mhm.
The positive way of saying that is thank you for your patience. I mean, again, it's like it's
Right.
magic. It's
Exactly.
magic, and it's so simple,
It
you know?
is simple. And the other thing reminded me of this one is, and I'm a little more self-conscious or self-aware of it now, is not to start off with text or an email with "I'm a sorry,"
Yeah,
because it's not sincere. If you were that sorry, you wouldn't have probably did it. I mean, there's
that's
always
right. That's
you
right.
shouldn't be apologizing for anything. You need to start thinking, and it's funny because it's by habit, but then you think, well, I don't want to lie either, right? Because lying, why would I lie to a person? I don't need to lie.
Yeah.
And then you're challenged to find the right words. But
Well,
I
yeah,
certainly appreciate when I get it. What I don't like is to get an email or a text or even a conversation with somebody start apologizing to me from the beginning. I don't because I know it's not
yeah.
sincere.
Well, it makes you uncomfortable. It's like, come on, what's your agenda with that?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah, exactly.
one of the phrases that pops into my head. I don't know if it's on this sheet. If it is, I apologize. But my father used to tell me when I was young, he said, "Don't say to be honest with you, because that's implying that up to this
That's a good
point
one
you
too.
have not been honest.
Yeah.
Say to be frank with you." And I'm like, it's
Yeah,
another perfect example of the nuance of words, right? Like one
yeah,
of them is like, I'm not bullshitting you that I've not been honest up to this point. What I'm saying is
yeah,
I'm going to be particularly frank in what I'm about to say,
yeah.
but I have always been honest with you, right?
Yeah. The word
Real,
I use, I'd be interested in your how you feel, but I tried and I rarely use the word honest because I was aware of that, a few years ago, but I do use the word transparent. Uh,
mm-hmm,
and I also believe there's degrees of transparency.
mm-hmm,
Being too transparent is actually not a good thing.
right.
Um, but the word transparent gives you some layers to your
Yep.
definition of transparent and to be appropriate as far
It's a
as you're
great
concerned.
word.
Yeah,
Transparent's a great word, but like
yeah.
to your point, you can get yourself in trouble by being too transparent, and
Oh
but
yeah.
you can also come off as extremely authentic if you do transparency well,
Yep.
you know.
I agree. Yeah.
And that's a timing thing as much as anything else in my estimation.
Mm.
So
Well,
so
that's part of what your framework is. It's
when to say it.
so
Yeah.
your number four, the when you say
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 So the next one on our chart, number 4, is when you're busy. The default lazy response is I'm too busy. The more positive
Ah,
response is I think I'll be able to get to that, to look into that by probably next Tuesday. Let me get back to you.
yeah.
One
That's the other
is
one.
I'm completely dismissive of what you want me to do, and the other one's I definitely want to help you. I just got to put it in the right slot, right? I don't have an
Yeah.
available slot right yet. You know?
Again, every time I hear this, or somebody start off, I'm too busy. It's not that they were too busy; they were too busy for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So it's the worst one, right? Please don't say you're too busy.
I'm too busy. Yeah, well, fuck you too.
Yeah, yeah. That's what kind of is that you're saying. I'm too way too busy for you. So now I'm telling you that
Yeah,
you're
you're
so
not.
much less important than all these other
You're
things in my life.
yeah.
But
You're
thank you
not.
for sharing that with us right in the beginning of the
Yeah,
conversation because now
yeah.
I know where
That's
I rank in your life, right?
yeah. Thanks for getting that out of the way early, Dick. So
Yeah, very good.
the next one, when another person is responsible. Oh, this is a good one. Yeah. Well, the default is that's not my job. And the more positive answer here is, let me connect you with the right person. And I used to, this reminds me, my first mentor used to say this all the time. It's like, if somebody calls the company and the receptionist answers, the controller answers, a recruiter answers, a sales rep answers, or I answer, it's the same response. It's always my responsibility, right?
Mhm.
This problem is never the person who's calling. They're not going to get dismissed. It's not my job. It's like,
Mhm.
no, my job is to take the information and get you an answer in a timely fashion.
Mhm.
Whether I'm the
Mhm.
source of the answer or not is irrelevant, right? But it's
Mhm.
my responsibility because I'm the client facing guy. I'm the first impression that you get of my organization. And I
Yeah.
always took that to heart.
Interesting. So just by simply changing the the answer to not my job, the answer is yes, that is my job to make sure that I guide you in the right direction. It
Yep.
doesn't mean you have to do it. Yeah, I'm getting better at that too. I will say uh, another worse one is, oh, that's not my pay scale, or that's not something like that. But the other one is uh, telling them where whose job that is. It's
Hmm.
not saying not my job. You're saying, hey, that's not my area of responsibility. However, uh, and then this person's name, I recommend you connect with them directly. Like, don't even own it. Like, it's up to you to connect them. Of course, if they didn't know each other, that's different. Then you would have to make a connection. But you immediately tell them where they can get the answer to that question, or who has responsibility that can make that decision.
Yeah, it's a nice segue into the next one, which is when you're unsure about something, the lazy default is I'll try, and the more positive, personally responsible response is I'll handle this. You know,
Mm.
there's a big difference between I'll try and I'll take care of it. Like,
Yeah, what question I have about this one though, Mark, is that I handle it sounds like you're gonna do something, and sometimes you're not gonna handle it. So I had a problem with that one. That one to me is leading, because it's you're saying that maybe you're not going to handle it. Then you need to tell them you're not going to handle it. Um, but you
well,
don't tell them
I
you're going to try and then don't do anything.
Well, of course, you never say that you're going to do something and then not do it. But when I
Right.
see I'll handle this, it kind of means the same thing as the last one in my estimation. It's like, it's not going to be me, but it's going to be me that gets to the person that's going to tell me who the person is. And I'm going to get to that person, and they're going to get back on the phone and call you with the solution. So does
Uh,
that mean I'll handle it? Kind of, maybe not, but it means I'm not going to completely dismiss you, or I'm
yeah.
not going to just tell you I'll give it a shot and maybe I'll get lucky,
Yeah.
you know?
I would just, when unsure, I would say, I'm unsure of that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
uh, I recommend that you speak to this person, or why don't we, why don't I circle back to you but just tell them you're unsure. Other
Yeah, well,
than,
that's the second one. It was back. If you go back to the second one, when you don't know, I'll look into that and get back to you.
got it.
So that's it's a slightly different flavor of the same thing, but I get it.
Yeah.
And here's another apology based one. After you make a mistake, sorry, I missed whatever it was, X. And the more positive, responsible one is, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Thank you for
Uh,
spotting that. You
that's a good
know,
one.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. I mean, they're all kind of like victimhood, somebody else's fault versus let me take care of this. I'm responsible. I'm a representative of the organization. You're in good hands, with Allstate kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
those are the so far.
Yeah.
So,
Another one on that one, if I make a mistake, say, yeah, that I own that one.
yep,
That one's on me.
yep,
Um, thank you for pointing that out. But you just come right out and own it, because
yeah,
if you come right out and own it, then they're forgiving too. You can move on. But if you don't
yeah,
own it and say, hey, that one's totally on me. I missed that one. Uh, yeah, that it's I like people that take ownership right away of something,
of
because then
course.
you're not guessing what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the next one is like when you're asking for something, sorry to bother you. and
Or
the more
sorry. Yeah.
the more yeah, sorry just never works for me. I mean, unless you really fuck something up. But if you're making a nuanceful mistake here, a misjudgment here, or you say something out of context. I mean, we've all seen people lately in the media get in front of a microphone and say something that was quote unquote politically incorrect, but also innocuous at the same time, like meaningless. And other people, the media grab onto it and they crucify this person. If that person apologizes, my personal position on that is they make it worse,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
And
guess
so
there is a way you could use the word sorry to say, hey, I'm sorry that that inconvenienced you.
mhm.
And then, but then you don't stop there. You say, this, it may be an explanation, not an excuse, right? So,
Yeah, I think as long as you take ownership, it can come in different forms. It can come
mhm,
in different phrases. But I think to your point, when you own something, boy, that just opens people up. It's just such a positive experience. Then when you apologize for something, it just, I don't know, the respect just goes away. You are all of a sudden, there's no respect for you anymore. Like you just rolled over that easy, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. But if you acknowledge it, then you're also you're you're demonstrating that you've acknowledged it and it won't happen again, or at
Yep.
least you're going to be aware that it's not going to be a repetitive behavior. I'm especially if it's a new relationship, I'm looking for behaviors.
Yep.
And if somebody's behavior more, more than one time, that to me starts to become a behavior. And I just don't want to spend time with them because,
Yep. Yep.
and is it personal? Yeah, I guess it is kind of personal. I don't want to waste a lot of time with somebody that I know, or I don't want to be mad at myself when I know there was a behavior. I noticed a behavior, I accepted it, and now I'm mad because the
Mhm.
behavior has affected the outcome of the project, right? So
Yep, yep, yep. I like the next one. It says when you disagree and the negative response is you're wrong. Like when is that a good thing to say? And the positive spin is, I have a different perspective on that. Or like I might say to somebody, I feel a little differently about that. You mind if I share that with you? It's just like it's non-confrontational, but you are clearly disagreeing. And I think that's a good combo. I don't
yeah,
agree with you. However, I just want to share with you that I have a different approach, or, I understand where you're coming from, or I think I understand where you're coming from, but I have a different perspective on that. And I'd like to share it with you.
yeah, that's actually a really good one. Although there are people at times that kind of get off on being on saying things like that, right? To create conflict. There are certain humans you have to be careful that really enjoy the attention of a conflict,
Hmm.
and whether they're again self-aware of it or not, they are saying things to grab attention because the focus then shifts to them.
No,
Uh,
it's a good point. I think we collectively have to be careful that those people can get you in a death spiral. If you
mhm,
if you bite, all you got to do is bite, and all of a sudden you're spinning down into negativity.
mhm.
So yeah, yeah,
Or like you said, even if we were using the word, if you start off with somebody you're wrong, you right away put them on the defense, put them in a
hmm.
defensive position. That even if they let that one go, they're going to come back and get you later because they don't
Yep,
like you,
yep.
yeah, it becomes a gotcha game. So
Well, the next one is it's interesting. The title is sharing an idea, and the negative response is this might sound silly, but well, that's kind of defeatist in my mind. You're giving the person an excuse to give your idea no consideration. Like, why lead with that? What versus, hey, here's an idea to consider. Maybe we
mhm,
could look at this slightly different way.
mhm,
And I think that in my life, in my experiences, I've tried to aspire to different levels of accomplishment or performance or service to other people. People like you, they like to beat down new ideas. They like to play
yeah,
naysayer to new ideas. They like to say, that's not a good idea, or that's impossible. Nobody can do that. And it's like, just pick somebody who's uber successful and they steamroll people like that. It's just like,
yeah.
I don't care what you think about this idea. It's a new idea. It's creative. I'm going to dig in and see where it goes. I'm not listening to the naysayers, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. This is another one too. Again, if you do it right, and you have an idea, it could really it could be a breakthrough. It could change the if it's a ten if the situation is tense, you can minimize the tension. Um, I know, again, as an inventor, I'm often thinking outside the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people like it, a lot of times they don't, depending on who it is. But it does help reframe something right away. If you could tell if you're having a conversation, or if, especially if it's a group meeting and you're just not making progress, to throw something out there, and that's another way of saying it. I can have an idea. Hey, I just want to throw something out there. It's way off, but just stay with me for a second and just to tell me if this adds up at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're giving them the opportunity to start to see it differently. When sometimes you get stuck in this place where nothing's happening. So,
Yeah, no, I was watching Jordan Peterson was talking yesterday, and he was talking about Elon Musk. You talk about an idea guy. You talk
mhm,
about a guy that pushes the envelope.
mhm.
And he was talking about it because this guy had come to him because Jordan Peterson, as you well know, is a psychiatrist, among other
Yeah.
things. I don't think he practices anymore. He's dealing with fame and fortune right now. God bless him. But this guy came to him very successful, and he started to spit out the statistics of this guy. Like, he built 165 universities across virtual universities across the world for college degreed people. And it's like building one of those would be almost impossible. 165 in different countries with different languages. And then he had 2,500 startups that he successfully exited from. And he was feeling depressed because his roommate was doing so much more than he was doing. And then Jordan Peterson smirks and looks at the camera and goes, "You know who his roommate was? Elon Musk."
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the whole the
Well, it's one of
defeatist.
my favorite quotes. All
Yeah,
comparison leads to misery.
yeah,
And it's true. You
yeah.
start comparing yourself to other people, you will be miserable no matter
Yes,
who you are.
yes.
So that
Yeah, well,
yeah.
and the other, obviously, the other angle in the sharing of ideas is, I think this is a guy, Elon's a guy that basically says, I don't care what anybody thinks about my ideas. I'm going to pursue them until I can't anymore, or until they don't work. And I think that's just a shining example of encouraging new ideas and not being a
Yeah,
naysay.
but to live your life to match up with Elon Musk, you're gonna have a miserable life.
No question, no
You
question.
know,
But I mean, from
yeah,
a relativity standpoint, I thought it was a fascinating
everything's
case study.
relative, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
but here's
yeah.
another one before we'll get stuck. We'll move on. But the idea one is another one I've been using, especially again, it just kind of opens the conversation up. Is that instead of an idea, I'll say I have a hypothesis, right? Because and I did a deep dive on this. What is an hypothesis versus a theory or an idea? But an hypothesis is designed to be challenged. You're
Hmm.
putting that out there. You have an hypothesis. You have an example of what you think you've identified the problem, and you have a hypothesis of the solution to the problem, and you're going to push that out there knowing it's going to be criticized, because that's the
Hmm.
intention. That's exactly what it's for,
Hmm.
is to be challenged, and you're asking for people to challenge. So it
Yeah.
completely changes the dynamics of some stuff. If you're trying to collaborate to get good ideas, because you're opening your mind to um, people adding to this hypothesis to eventually have an action or a theory. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're encouraging critical thinking. It's wonderful. I think science is never over, right? There's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
no. It's good. That's a good add on there.
yeah. You know what the
Second,
differences between a hypothesis and a theory is?
I don't think I would assume
Yeah.
the theory. Then there's
Anyway,
no intention. There's no
well,
intention of challenging it.
theory has been proven. There's a theory to it. It has evidence. It's more factual. It's
Hmm.
supported.
Do you
That's
know
a
if it can be questioned?
anything could be questioned, but there's a proven history of the theory of something, that it's demonstrated to be effective, or the outcome has been demonstrated over a period of time. It's been
Yeah,
somewhat
yeah. No,
proven.
as
That
soon
I'm
as you
just
said,
Yeah, in order to have again, I'm an inventor, right? That you have an idea, an hypothesis. Not It's more, a hypothesis is way more than an idea, but but there's certain things you have to make sure you're not. There's already theories out there that have been proven.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a very different conversation. They get mixed up a lot together. So you have
Yeah,
to.
when you said that, when you asked me what's the difference, I went back to high school because I remember having that conversation. I can't remember what class it was, but I remember having that
Interesting.
conversation.
Yeah.
So, second to last one is after you help someone. Uh, and I looked at this and I kind of smirked because I say this too often. No worries, no worries, as opposed to, "Hey, man, I'm happy to help." You know, that's pretty nuanced. That's pretty
Ah,
nuanced.
yeah. I felt the same way about this, Mark. The context is a bit off on this one. After helping, well, a lot of times I'll use the word no worries. It's not after helping them. It's after they did something. I'm just letting them know it's don't worry. It's over. Let's move on. Right. No worries. Like they've said to me, I'm sorry or blah, blah, blah. No worries. That's good. It's all good. Let's just move on. Right. So
Well, what I thought after helping was if when someone says to me, "Thank you," and I say, "Hey, no worries," where
oh,
maybe
interesting.
it'd be more effective to say, "Hey, man, I'm happy to help." It's more positive.
Hmm.
It's more finite. There's more closure there, I think.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it
then
opens up another conversation. Should you lead anything with a negative as a no? Uh, no worries is a really become a term. It's kind of a nice term. It's a term to kind of just no problem, relax. Be it's all good. But
I'd say to me it kind of feels like a throwaway, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So I don't know
interesting.
that one's necessarily right or wrong, but as soon as I looked at it, it made me think, yeah, maybe you should stop saying that as much and maybe stick with the, "Hey, man, happy to help.
Yeah, again,
Glad I could help," you know. And
back to
then
self awareness, right? Just being
yeah,
self
this
aware.
whole thing is an exercise in self awareness.
Yeah.
And the last one is when you're recommending something. And the negative default is I think maybe we should, which is just completely non-committal and kind of
Mhm,
limp-wristed.
mhm,
Versus, you talk about credibility or being an authority on something. I recommend dot dot dot. You
mhm.
know, so one is you're not really a person of expertise that I might trust or find credible. The other one is, wow, you're pretty confident about that. I should listen,
Mhm.
you know? Yeah, it's a great chart, Jim.
Yeah,
It was
but let's go
really,
back to that one before we wrap this up, though, because anytime you start a sentence with "I think," what you're saying is "I'm not really sure." So then the first thing I would say, well, then why am I listening to you if you're not
yep,
sure?
yep.
Uh, so again, I'm sure I've used it many times, but I'm gonna rethink how I use the word "I think maybe." I think maybe it's like I don't have time for you to maybe think.
Yeah. Why don't you just say I have no fucking idea?
Exactly. If you say that, then we can make some progress, right?
There you go. There you go. No,
But there's yeah.
I think I'm tempted, and so I'd like to, with your permission, to just kind of reiterate my framework in the context of everything that we just said. I think it becomes very evident that, what you say, how you say it, which is a lot of, we did both of those, what you say and how you say it, and then to whom, right? And then when. And when I coach people, that's the framework I use. And I think this is a perfect example of certainly what you say is so important. How you say it is so important. And the other two are situational. To whom do you
Mhm,
say it? Like, do you go up a couple levels or do you talk directly to your boss? Or do you go around your boss, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, which is a dangerous thing. And then, when you say it, it might be too early to say something. Maybe you should listen for a while before you say something.
mhm, mhm.
And most of the time, I think listening and not saying anything for a while is better than opening your mouth right away.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap up with mine as well. Again, the 5 Ws is the main framework for any project, but that's a little more involved. But this new one that I'm started to use, and I like it, is number one, you start off with the assumptions right away. Hey, before we get started, based on our last conversation, my assumptions are blah, 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 and then ask them what theirs are too. So we're not spending any time trying to figure out what the basis of the conversation or whatever it is, the discussion or whatever we're doing, but assumptions right away. Be as transparent and as direct as you can possibly be. Number two, the desired outcomes. Don't hold back. Say, hey, the desired outcome for this project is to generate traffic or members or money. Say, hey, my desired outcome is that I'll make X amount of money, or it'll be the beginning to generate revenue for this project. But be very, very specific about the desired outcome. And by the way, this is a mutual conversation. It's not me telling them what I want. It's this is my desired outcome. What is yours? Every one of these. This is my assumption. What is yours? So they're not trap questions. They're open-ended for a reason. The third one is who, not how. This is I'm really into this one right now, right? It's not how do you do something. It's who you do it with makes a difference, and then who can do it better than you. Who is out there that can do this, that I would be much more effective, like you and I on this podcast, right? When I wanted to do a podcast, it wasn't just, hey, do I want to do a podcast? Who do I want to do it with? And then the assumption is you have a common worldview, ideology, whatever it is. Number 4 is resources, big one. We skip over it a lot, right? What are the needed resources? And resources consist of time, energy, not just time, right? Your energy, because that your commitment, and then your ability to execute. That's well, actually, that's number 5, execution. Does this person have the ability to execute? Do I have the ability to execute based on all the other things I have going on in my life? So those are my my new 5 ones. But
yeah, I think that, I'll conclude by saying what I hear there is you're trying to begin that conversation, that negotiation, that engagement with a level of transparency and clarity that is automatically positioning you as a person of authenticity. And you're affording
and giving them an opportunity.
You're affording the other person the same opportunity.
Yeah. Back to framework. So yeah.
Good stuff, Jim.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it was so.